You've already moved, but the final frequency is still waiting for permission to complete the cycle. Your body has learned to rotate its legs, breathe more presently, and release sounds that were once trapped within. The sacrum has dropped, the diaphragm has released, the throat has opened, and yet something isn't quite right. There's a dark atmosphere, not because of a lack of technology, but because it follows no visible logic. It's a quiet place, rarely explored and rarely talked about. But when it closes, everything else recedes. You can feel it in the tension that returns for no reason. Suddenly, no one can explain it. In the impulse that stops before it becomes a gesture, it's as if your body knows the movement is incomplete. As if a piece of code has been lost. Not in their actions, but in the internal architecture that enables them. This point keeps the system on alert. It blocks the pace, delays awakening, and no one talks about it. Today you'll discover the fourth freeze point, the invisible block that takes everything away from you and sabotages your creative mode. Hardly anyone knows about it, but everyone feels its effects. There's a movement that never happened, and that's why its liberation hasn't yet begun. It's not about stretching or strengthening. It's about dissolving the last weapon that silently perpetuates the trauma. You've heard of freeze. This invisible condition paralyzes the body, even when it appears active. But few know that it has a hidden axis, a point that doesn't beat, doesn't tremble. And that's why it escapes all diagnosis. It's the fourth point of the somatic freeze, the final obstacle that sabotages your entry into creative mode. While the sacrum, diaphragm, and throat act as primary portals of liberation, this point acts as a guardian. It observes, contains, suspends. For this reason, the vibration refuses to pass through, not for lack of will, but for lack of access. And most surprising of all, this point was already known to the ancients. In Egyptian healing texts, it appears as the central content of the spiritual voice. Hermes spoke of a living seal. Thoth described it as an inverted key that could channel stagnant energy into the field of creation. What you will learn in this video is not theory. It's an activation. You'll identify, reach, and resolve the fourth point of freeze. You'll understand why it affects your emotions, your creativity, and your spirituality. And most importantly, how to unleash this hidden mechanism through a barely perceptible yet profoundly transformative gesture. It's not about imagination, but about feeling. Today, your body will show you what the mind alone could never achieve. In the ancient mystery schools, a kind of silence reigned that signified not the absence of sound, but the presence of power. Students sat for hours before a master who spoke nothing, but breathed with precision. His tongue rested on the roof of his mouth, and his eyes were closed, as if listening to something from within. Those who couldn't follow the emptiness left. Those who stayed behind began to listen. The Egyptians knew this hidden place in the palace as the gate back. Thoth taught that it was the vibrational sphere in which the word is formed before it is born, and in which it can also be dissolved before it is harmed. According to his manuscripts, the palate contains an energetic saddle that can interrupt or release the subtlest vibration of consciousness, the inner sound. Hermes Trismegistus connected this point with the invisible thread between spirit and matter, explaining that words are created not only by what they express, but also by what they resonate with before they are spoken. In this realm, everything is speech, even silence, and it is precisely there, in this underappreciated anatomical space, that most emotional blockages remain untouched. In tantric texts, we find the concept of the bindu, a point that interrupts the flow of life in cases of unspoken trauma. They taught that without the release of this inner zone, the Kundalini energy returns, even if the rest of the body is already activated. This is why so many seekers feel the initial impulse but are unable to sustain the creative movement. In Kabbalah, this region is associated with the bridge between the sapphire of Dot, hidden knowledge, and the other spheres of the tree of life. In other words, it represents that which cannot be spoken but felt, that which is understood only in the silence between one word and the next. This point is never neutral, even in stillness. It is constantly active, both as a passage and as a barrier. And that is precisely what makes it one of the most sacred and negative places in the human body. Researchers at the University of Toronto published a surprising study in 2021, mapping the brain areas activated during silent singing exercises. They found that contact between the tongue and upper eyelid directly regulates coherence between the vagus nerve and the limbic system. Simply put, this point in the mouth acts as a neurosensory switch that can alter emotional states and restore nervous system homeostasis. It's not symbolic, but electronic. Neuroscience already knows that the floor of the mouth is a highly intubated zone connected to nerve endings that influence the pituitary gland, the brain, and the parasympathetic pathways. What few mention, however, is that its activation does not depend on rational commands. It responds to vibrational codes such as sounds, leg resonance, and tongue micropresses. Techniques such as vestibular tonation and oral gram have been successfully used to treat PTSD, phobias, and autoimmune diseases. And the most fascinating thing is that they are all based on the same principle: the release of blocked energy from the palatal vibration center. It's as if this point contains a code for somatic rebounds. Renowned scientist Stephen Porges, founder of the polyvagal theory, explains that healing from trauma depends not only on how we feel, but also on how the body processes sounds and silences in the oral cavity. In other words, there is an anatomical intelligence there, not metaphorical but measurable, which ancient traditions called the portal of language. Or perhaps the invisible bridge is finally being recognized by science as the core of autonomous reorganization. And perhaps we have ignored it for so long, precisely because it lies so close and deep within us. The first key is not touch, but stillness. Before activating a point, you must silence automatic impulses. At this point, the body must enter a mode of deep listening. Sit with your spine straight, legs spread, and eyes closed. Remain completely still for exactly 90 seconds, and resist the urge to adjust anything. This period of time forces your nervous system to switch off autopilot and enter a state of physical receptivity. Now gently guide the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth, just behind your upper teeth. This is where you enter the circulation. Don't press, just make contact. Hold the contact points firmly but clearly, as if you simply wanted to feel the vibratory pulse of the inner space. This gesture, although subtle, sends a signal to the vagus nerve to switch to parasympathetic mode. Breathing at this point should be nasal, slow, and flowing, but not forced. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Exhale for 6 seconds. Hold for only 3 seconds, then stop. After the 3rd second, begin a sustained, almost inaudible sound like an inner tone. The mouth remains closed. The sound vibrates in the spine and reverberates in the oral cavity. This sound should originate from the throat, but spread outward as a mix of vibrations behind the mouth. The tongue remains in contact. The sound acts as an access key. Here you don't project outward. You're swinging inward. Pay attention to what's happening with your spine, knees, and abdomen. If any of these areas spontaneously release or move, don't intervene. They touch the nonlinear trigger frequency. This state is called internal vestibular reset. It activates microcircuits that connect the floor of the mouth to the base of the spine and the limbic centers. The body doesn't understand words. It understands heartbeats. And right now, you're decoding the heartbeat of your ancestors. Now place your hands on the sides of your face and, without applying any pressure, simply breathe through your fingers into your knees. Don't try to move. Don't try to force anything. Just feel the density of what's still stuck. It's not just muscle, it's memory. The tension accumulated in this region is ancient. It arises from everything that has been silenced, censored, and frozen. This is called an interruption of the motor affective cycle, and every kneeling floor is a subconscious mind filled with content. Breathe mentally for 4 cycles and feel the air slowly touch your throat. Let the knee become fluid within, as if flowing out of its structure. And then, without opening your mouth, let your knee drop a few millimeters. You don't open, you let go. Now focus your attention on your ears. Imagine hearing the most subtle sound there is. The sound that comes before the sound. This dense silence has a name. This is the prephonatory threshold. This is where the frequency of the verbal impulse is created. Before it becomes words, as you enter this space, you will feel an electric field pulsing between your temples. Now, without thinking, without analyzing, with your mouth closed, make a guttural sound, a sound that comes from within, something between the sound of a cat and the vibration of a meditating animal. This sound isn't meant for other ears. It's for the central nervous system. It massages the meninges, loosens the cranial sutures, and sends a new message to the brain. The danger zone is over. Continue for 90 seconds. Don't control it. Just let it flow. If you cry, let it happen. When the breath comes, follow it. You reach a point frozen in time. And in that moment, you can hear it from within for the first time. After the sound stops, you remain silent. Not like someone who has stopped, but like someone who hears something that was never said. This pause is not lacking. It is fertile ground. It is the moment in which the new code attempts to imprint itself on the body. Gently place the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth, directly behind your front teeth. Do not press. Just make contact. This point is crucial. It connects circuits that aren't connected in people living in chronic states of alarm. The descending energy of the brain and the ascending energy of the base. By uniting these poles, the neuroelectrical conflict that regulates the hypothalamic spinal angle is resolved. In practice, this means that the body no longer listens to commands and dangers, but rather to the fact that it is safe to exist. Stay in this state for at least 2 minutes. Over time, you'll realize that it's not just relaxation. It's a form of presence that has never been taught, an inner listening without judgment, without labeling, without urgency. In this moment, the tone of the knee balances with that of the perineum, and a new vibrational posture emerges. The final step requires not action, but vigilance. Once the channel is open, the body tries to return to its previous pattern, not because it's stronger, but because it's more familiar. So throughout the day, pause whenever you feel tension in your face, chest, or while eating. Return to the point. Place your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Feel the vibration of silence. Return to the frequency of your last permission. And remember, it's not sounds, movements, or touches that heal. It's listening deeply to everything that has remained interrupted until now. Noah only realized something was wrong when he began avoiding silence. He filtered the entire room with noise, podcasts, voice messages, and neutral frequencies, as if he were afraid of what might happen if the room became too quiet. But it wasn't a fear of silence. It was the fear of what his body would say when silence finally arrived. During a somatic relaxation session, he noticed that his mouth remained closed despite physical relaxation. It was as if this area had been forgotten by all conscious commands. He had already untied his legs. He took a deep breath. He channeled the sound through his throat. But there, right there on the palate, everything was still locked away. Tension had accumulated there, a tension that no breath had ever reached. It was a kind of security that disobeyed desire because it didn't come from reason. When the therapist asked him to place his tongue at the highest point of his mouth and simply listen to what came out, Noah expected nothing. But what came out wasn't an idea. It was a trembling, an echo, a tremor that had spread over decades. It was like accessing a memory, without image, without story, just a body. His knee broke, his neck relaxed, his neck warmed, and for the first time, the sound emerged fully, not as a technique, not as a performance, but as if the sound had always been inside him, just waiting for permission to come out. The following week, he noticed that his reactions had changed. He stopped justifying himself so often, stopped shutting himself off so often. It was as if the frequency of his absence had finally come into play, and all because he had reached a point almost no one is taught to reach. A place that, if not reintegrated, keeps everything else in a subtle contagion. Noah didn't learn to express himself better. He learned not to interrupt the cycle his body already knew how to complete. The hidden point was already activated, yet this is precisely where the most subtle and disappointing obstacle appears. The body tries to return to its old pattern, not out of rational resistance, but because of vibrational attachment. It has been conditioned to survive with this closed point and to detach itself from the new state as quickly as possible. Part of you fears the unknown. This is the key to returning. The old frequency, even if it no longer works, still feels familiar. And every living system strives for coherence with what it already knows. At this point, many interrupt the process because they think it hasn't worked. In reality, the field is trying to stabilize a new code. It's important to understand that this point doesn't completely close again. He's simply hesitating. He's testing. He wants to know if you'll keep him open through your presence, or if you'll let him return without habit. And here lies the secret. Don't fight the old pattern. Offer a new rhythm to break it. When you notice an attempt to return, place your tongue against the wall of your mouth. Breathe deeply through your nose and visualize the point as a spiraling circle of pulsating light. This small micro-action sends a message to the system. We are aware, we are safe, and the cycle is completed. Repeat this for 3 breaths. You aren't just beginning, you are stabilizing. True healing doesn't proceed in a straight line. It's a dance between what was and what is being born. But this time you won't be pulled back, because the frequency no longer depends on effort. It is maintained by your choice. The 4th point isn't just a physical structure, it's an energetic threshold between what still resonates and what can finally be released. Now you know that there's an invisible center that still holds the last tension, and that this silent retention could be behind the constant feeling of incompleteness. You're already moving, you've already deactivated the larger doors. But there's a code that reveals itself only to those who silence the noise and listen to what vibrates beneath his voice. The floor of his mouth is no coincidence, it is an altar. Here the word is born. Here the vibration arises. This is where reality is programmed. And this is where many people break out without realizing it. The body remains in pause mode. Even if the soul longs for movement, when you awaken this point, the vibration no longer needs to be projected through effort. It radiates outward. Decisions become clearer. Intuition becomes clearer. Inner space becomes lighter. The blockage that prevented the cycle from completing is no longer in the way. However, this access is not achieved through force or pressure. It requires presence. It's not violence that breaks through this blockage, but reverence. And the most remarkable thing is, when you activate this, you notice that the outside world also reacts differently. Conversations take on a new frequency. People listen to you more attentively. Reality seems to rearrange synchronicities, giving your expression space. And that's no coincidence. It's vibrational coherence. Thoth once said, "Wisdom is the power of form that arises through stillness." And perhaps that's why so many never complete the cycle, because they try to understand with their minds what can only be activated in the body. Now you have the key. Not because you know more, but because you feel different. May your word be a seed. May your breath be a bridge. And may everything within you know from now on how to return to the flow, because what was interrupted is finally pulsing again. If this content resonated with you, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. This way, the flow continues and more people can discover such paths. I'd love to know how this resonated with your body. Let me know in the comments. I disconnected the 4th point and released the interrupted movement of my creative soul. This affirmation seals your path to liberation from the invisible blockage that has silenced your true flow. Share this video with someone who, like you, feels that something deep is still waiting to be awakened. And don't stop. Click on the screen and switch to another transformative video on the channel. Each piece of information opens a new portal, and the next one could be what you've been missing to complete your cycle. Remember, ending the flow at the 4th point doesn't just free the body. It unlocks the cosmic dance that only you can choreograph.